Hey, freedom fighters. This is David Delaney with Tenbound. Thank you so much for listening to the Sales Development Podcast and tuning in each week. You are amazing. Sales development is the hardest job on the go-to-market team, and you do it well every day, and we appreciate you being here. Hey, I wanted to really quickly let you know about a project that we've been working on over the last couple months that we launched a beta version over at tenbound.com/directory. And what this is a directory to help you out as you're looking for products and services that support your sales development efforts. As you may know, we have developed the first sales development industry market map where we pull together the very, very specialized products and services that are created to help you hit your sales development goals. And the number one request that we got after we developed the market map is, hey, how do I double click on this and learn more about the companies, products, and services that are on the market map here on Tenbound? And we didn't have anything like that. You could just basically download the market map and kind of use it as a guide to start looking at some of these other companies that you may need for your sales development strategy. So we developed a directory, and what it is basically you look at the market map, you look at the quadrant that you're interested in. So say you're shopping for outsourced SDR services, or you're looking at all the different availabilities around sales engagement platforms that are there. Now you can actually double click on that, go to the directory, and each one of the companies will have their own page, a showcase page where they can put down very quickly, okay, what's the difference between them and the other ones? What's their value prop? What are their case studies? And how do I get in touch with them? You know, boom, boom, boom. An easy way for you to check whether they're legit. This is a beta version, so we're going to be developing more robust capabilities so that you can save companies, look at their various ratings on rating sites, and have that all in one place as you're doing your sales development research. So we're really excited about that. If you are a company that sells to the sales development community, be sure to claim your profile, get on there, register, get your page up, get your value prop up, get a few differentiators so that people know about you and they don't have to go to, a bunch of different sites. They can just start to gather that information in one place. And be sure to leave a comment. Let us know what you think. Let us know what it's missing, what would help you to be able to determine your sales development strategy, and companies that you use that aren't on the market map and are not in the directory, but should be, that have really helped you to achieve your sales development goals. So again, it's tenbound.com/directory. Get on there, check it out. Let us know what you think. Thanks.
Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Sales Development Podcast. So honored and blessed that you could join us today, and got a great guest on the show, a new friend of mine who is in our industry. He's creating something that can definitely help us out. So Matt Belkin, founder of Growflare, thanks so much for coming on the show.
David, thank you so much. I am sincerely honored given the depth and breadth of leaders that you've had on this show. I just hope that I can be as entertaining and insightful as those that have preceded me. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. You got it, man. I mean, sales development's hard, and everyone's out there trying to do their best with what we got right now. And, it's interesting because you had a very diverse background and experience in getting into this industry. Tell us about, how you came to this industry and, what led you to start Growflare.
Sure. Yeah, always easy to talk about yourself, right?
There you go.
Yeah, you're right. I did kind of follow a little bit of an unorthodox path. I started back in the day in investment banking with a couple different outfits, most notably JP Morgan. And I really wanted to get in. I kind of felt when I was at JP Morgan as an equity analyst that I was kind of like the commentator on the Super Bowl, where I was always talking about the players, how good they were, or how they could have done this play, or they should have done that play, or the coach should have done this or that. And I always wanted to be on the field. I always wanted to be the guy carrying the trophy at the end of the game. And so I made the jump and got into tech, and have been in tech for over 2 decades since then, in a ton of different roles, everything from running post-sales to building startups to working at Fortune 500s, like a lot of the names that you'd recognize, like the Adobes of the world. And it's been a really interesting journey because I fell into the role of sales development and kind of the ecosystem really at more of a dark time at one of the startups that I was at. And you may have heard of these folks. They raised close to $900 million, a company called Domo. They're now publicly traded. And I joined them, and we had this just astronomical growth, hyper growth. We were a unicorn and billion-dollar valuation, actually multi-billion-dollar valuation. And unfortunately, we had a very horizontal go-to-market, and it's business intelligence, and it's one where essentially, who doesn't need data to run their business, right? So you could sell it into every vertical, you can sell it into every department, you can sell it into every person. And so with that enormity of opportunity also comes a tremendous burden, which is how do you empower your sales development team to qualify opportunities and convert leads and really just manage the pipeline. And it turned out to be a tremendously challenging problem for us to try to solve, not just because of the enormity of our addressable market, but because of the intensity of the expectations that we were trying to hit. And ultimately, we went through a couple of CMOs and we went through a couple of VPs of sales. And then our CEO came to me, and I was the COO at the time, and the CEO came to me and said, "Hey, Matt, this is broken. This is broken, and I need you to step in here and fix it." And that, David, is how I got into sales development.
So it sounds like sales development actually came to you.
It did. And
wow.
I wasn't asking, but I love solving problems. I really do. I'm just curious by my nature. I'm very data driven, and that's kind of the approach that I took. And really welcomed the opportunity, was willing to do whatever the company needed to be successful. I believe in the product, I still do. So it was a unique opportunity, but certainly a challenging one to step in the middle of.
Okay. And so he or she comes to you, has this conversation. You're like, okay, first of all, what is sales development? What are we going to do here? And what's your next step?
Yeah, I'm a very hands-on kind of guy. And certainly, I had a lot of success in B2B before, and critical to that success was partnering with the very talented sales leaders that I had worked with. So, I got the motion. I knew what people were trying to do. I knew what success was supposed to look like. I didn't know what was wrong. I can tell you that much. And the best way I know how to figure that out is just to put myself right in the middle of the problem. And so on day one, I went over to the SDRs and I sat there and I put on a headset and I just listened, right? And I just listened for hours, and it was painful. I'm not going to put lipstick on this pig. It was painful. And, what was perhaps the most painful for me was that these SDRs were hungry. They were talented, they're smart, they were working hard, but they just weren't successful. And that's a difficult thing to face when you're trying to mentor people and you're trying to give them opportunities to grow as kind of tomorrow's leaders and be successful, when so many pieces are there to help them be successful, and yet they continue to fail. And unfortunately, the scope of the problem was significant. I mean, we were at a point where nearly all of our SDRs were consistently missing quota. So, this was a significant issue that we were facing. And what I observed pretty quickly was that the prospects that we were getting, and, this is in no way to impugn marketing at all, because incidentally, as part of this new responsibility, I was also now running marketing. So
you couldn't really point the finger at anyone at this point.
No, I couldn't. It was a very short path to accountability.
Yes.
So,
right.
what was happening, and you just kind of call it for what it is that The funnel was being filled with a lot of prospects that really weren't prospects at all. And what I mean by that is that, classically, a qualified prospect is usually someone that goes through a firmographic qualification, based on things like employee size, revenue, perhaps industry, and there's a tremendous wealth of tools out there that help you do that. But the challenge is that doesn't tell you anything about what that prospect is really looking for. What are their wants? What are their desires? What are their interests? Right? What do they care about? And that's what was missing. And so what was happening was that these SDRs were being artificially buoyed up by prospects in their pipeline that were never going to buy. They were never going to buy. They were a terrible fit for the business. And that created the expectation that, we were swimming in this ocean of leads, and yet these SDRs weren't converting anything. And, I know you've seen this before in your career, don't blame the lead, blame the seller, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's unfortunately what was happening. Now, fortunately, we were recognizing that and we were trying to adjust pretty quickly. But that was the situation. That's what I saw. And that's really what began to try to change the course of.
Okay. And so when you sat down with the SDRs and you just determined, okay, these people are trying really hard. They have all the tools. It should be working, but they're not successful. So how did you define success in your mind? Was it purely the business perspective, or what was it that was not successful for you there?
Yeah, being a data-driven guy, the very easy answer to that was quota.
Right.
Right?
Okay, so we're missing quota, right?
Hey, we're missing quota. So, that led to a series of other secondary challenges that, you've covered in some of your previous podcasts. I mean, it weighs on morale and it becomes a much bigger problem. But yeah, in short, they were missing quota, and those leads that were making it over the wall were what I would say were poor fit, meaning that they had elements that could suggest that they were potential buyers, but in reality, they weren't fully qualified. So that was the challenge. And really, at the end of the day, that hurt everybody downstream in the funnel, because these SDRs would end up spending the vast majority of their time on folks that never would convert, which, ultimately penalizes them across a number of fronts, right? It steals their time to participate and develop good prospects. It steals their time from focusing on outbound efforts, and it ultimately impairs their ability to grow as individuals and contributors. So it was a pretty significant challenge.
Okay. And this is a situation where you've got a pretty good brand, you've got a marketing engine, you are getting inbound leads. And so they were spending a lot of times working the inbound leads. And were they also tasked with going outbound, or was that like a separate team?
Yeah, good question. So we're in a hot industry. The marketing machine was humming. So we were, we had, without disclosing anything, of course, too proprietary, we had a couple of dozen SDRs at the time. And on an average weekly basis, it's fair to say that they might be getting 100 inbound leads. And so, there are a lot of SDRs that I've managed since then that would be very happy with that profile.
It's right, but they weren't the right leads, though.
That's right.
And was there any sort of filtration in place when you started, or was it just sort of a queue?
There was some, again, it was mostly firmographic. And what we tried to begin doing was classic go-to-market segmentation to help them identify, the top accounts that seemed most representative of particular industries and verticals that we wanted to go after. And so that was the beginning of the fine-tuning of the engine. But the challenge, again, that we faced was that while we had a wealth of data from a lot of fantastic data providers, it was still, kind of anchored in these firmographic measures that were a helpful indication, but they were only part of the picture. And we needed to do more. We needed a richer data set, and we needed more perspective. And we had to get to it quickly, right? We had to get to it quickly because if the prospect wasn't qualified based on these richer insights, then we knew we needed to dismount and, either DQ them, move them into nurture. But somehow we had to recover that time. And I'll say, acknowledging the time that we're in right now, like there's no greater imperative right now than to do just that, right? At the time, we were in a very vibrant economy. This was several years ago. We were in a very vibrant economy, tons of pipeline, tons of capital, discretionary budget being allocated to the space that we were in. And now what we find ourselves in is quite a 180 from that. So there is incredible imperative to get, very good at qualifying folks based on a richer set of data.
Got it. Okay. And so at that point, did you try to find, a solution out there, or were you trying to build it yourself in Excel? Like, what was your first few steps in trying to empower them to be more prioritized?
Sure. So the first step was really to work backwards from what success looked like. So we said, who are our best customers? And this gets a little bit ICP oriented, but I don't want to make it academic necessarily. So what we would say is where, if you go to a sales guy, if you go to an SDR and you say, what was the best lead that you had this week? Or who is your best customer? And when I say best customer, I mean, who is going to get on the phone and provide a reference for you at the drop of the hat? Who's going to give you a renewal without a bunch of grief? Maybe, sort of macroeconomic conditions permitting, maybe who's going to go out golfing with you or go out to drinks or whatever the case may be, right? Like every salesperson knows that. They do. And they know that usually times 5, times 10. So what we tried to do is work backwards from that. And we tried to say, okay, well, what is it about, your specific customer that was so compelling? Why are they getting so much value? Why do you hold them in such high regard? And why do they hold you in such high regard? And we did that methodically for every area that we could reasonably segment and represent. So it was much more of a bottoms up ICP than it was a top-down ICP. And, top-down ICPs, nothing wrong with them. It's just a sort of a different approach to trying to get to the same destination. But we had a lot of success with that because similar to persona development, what we could develop was a very acute sense of what the pain was and what we were looking for. And ultimately that piece right there became the missing link, because what we could then do is move that all the way up to the top of the funnel and say, okay, as soon as you get these guys on the phone, or even if to the degree that we could do it, before you ever talk to them, how can we zero in on that pain? And that became one of the most pivotal and insightful developments that helped us, rebuild that organization and lead to our broader success.
Got it. Okay. So with such a broad suite of products, BI could be applicable to like almost every industry. And how did you decide which of the personas and the pain points to really focus on? Because it seems like the team could have spent tons of time like learning all these different industries and different types of people to talk to. Was there one that was just more lucrative for you that you really pinpointed?
We saw a lot of it depend on where people were most disposed towards digital transformation, right? Ones where there's a desire to use data to transform their business. And that was kind of one of the fun aspects of this exercise, because we did it across the individuals almost in a pod-like structure. And they didn't, kind of to avoid groupthink, we separated them. And by doing that, but ourselves being able to move across, kind of lily pad across the pods, we're able to observe these more macro trends that get at, your question, which was, essentially these common themes where you have people that were, more digital first, or they're trying to move to mobile, or, they're embracing, as I said, digital transformation as a strategic initiative. Those all became more macro themes that we really honed in on. And then again, moving those back up to the funnel, what we did is just tailored our qualifying questions either digitally or on the phone in person. And we tailored our qualifying questions to try to tease that out a lot faster. And quite honestly, that hadn't even existed in the process at all, right? So we had started essentially from ground zero on this, and we wove that into the qualification process. And that's what helped us get a lot of clarity, get a lot of focus, and get a lot more traction more quickly because, and I know you've evangelized this with some of your previous guests on the podcast, but you can get to know pretty fast with some very open-ended questions like this. And it just, at the end of the day, it ends up respecting everyone's time. It's not a bad thing. It's really not a bad thing to get to know fast. And we were able to achieve that in a very empathetic way, and one where, it was empowering. We were good listeners. We were seen as helpful and thought leaders, but it also served our business purpose of, kind of qualify or disqualify in as efficient a way as possible.
Got it. So you started to see some better results. And then what would happen in the past, it would be they would do their usual qualification, send over the lead to the sales rep, and then it wasn't successful. You weren't getting the pipeline. Now you start to see more patterns. You start to see some success. Is this when you started to think about, like, how do I put this into some sort of repeatable structure or repeatable engine that you ended up building?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah, you know me well enough to know how I think at this point.
Okay. You're like, how do I make this into a process, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And that's really the role of a COO respect. It's how do you scale this? How do you not throw humans at a problem? I mean, particularly in the era that we live in, where we're just so blessed with technology and AI, how do we use those to our advantage to really augment our ability as humans to operate? And that's what I was thinking of. And believe me, David, if there was somebody that did this, I would have bought it. I would have bought it in a second because it would have saved me a ton of time. But yeah, as I, continued in my own career past Domo and, worked at a couple other companies where I managed the sales team, managed the funnel. Yeah, I kept seeing the same recurring problem, and I kept talking to my peers about it. I said, I got to do something about this. I really do. And it just became a passion project for me. And I thought, like a lot of entrepreneurs, I thought that I could, solve this problem in about 6 months. It took me 3 times as long. And admittedly, I'm still building. But yeah, that's what ultimately gave birth to what I've been focused on, a lot lately, and ultimately how you and I ended up meeting each other.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me about that. So now it's like, all right, we know that, we need a better prioritization system. We know that this is repeatable. This is something that we can throw resources at. So how did you go about, building this?
Yeah. So, really the way that I looked at the problem was to say, across all of these companies that I had been at, what have I seen that is most effective in allowing me to, at the top of the funnel, to qualify prospects, to know if this is a place that I should spend time or not, across all the SDRs and even in marketing. And it, across that observation set, it all came back to the same idea, which was, what are the prospects' pain points? What are their wants? What are their interests? And historically, that has proven very difficult to get. It's this idea of wants and interests and needs is an area known as psychographics. And we've talked about firmographics a couple times now in this podcast, and many people are familiar with that. Many people are familiar with demographics. Not as many people are familiar with psychographics. And psychographics obviously just comes from the origin of psychology, right? It's what are your wants, needs, and interests. And it's existed since the early 60s, actually. It came out of academia in Harvard and Stanford. has really been used in the consumer realm very pervasively. Companies, for example, companies like Amazon recommendations. If you've ever bought anything that Amazon has recommended to you, which I certainly have,
Oh yeah.
that, Amazon recommendations are effectively psychographics. Basically, what they're serving you are recommendations based on your wants, needs, and interests. And that approach actually has proven to be extremely successful for them. They've reported publicly that their recommendations engine has produced a 30% lift on sales, which, Amazon is about a $140 billion company at this point in their retail area, Amazon.com. So, there's a tremendous proof point there where, about $42 billion of Amazon's upside has come from this concept of essentially delivering recommendations to prospects based on their wants and needs. And so that was a string that I really started to tug at and explore. And Amazon's not alone, right? You can see the same thing in, Netflix recommendations. Anytime you turn on Netflix, that's what's happening. It's targeting you based on your wants and needs. Spotify Discover, if you listen to that, it's the same thing. 31% of all of Spotify Discover, 31% of all Spotify music is delivered based on psychographics. And so as I was tugging on that string, I said, "What? God, there's so much potential here, but no one seems to do this in B2B. Why is that?" And it turns out it's really hard. It's really hard, because
there you go.
yeah, I mean, businesses just don't hang it out there. They don't, they're very guarded about their data. They don't participate in business surveys that talk about their feelings and their interests and their passions. And, it's very hard to figure that out. But, I'm not one to be easily deterred. And I just kept cracking at the nut. And I said, look, the open web is this tremendous treasure trove of data on business attitudes and values. And they're out there on their public websites, and they're out there in their press releases, and they're out there on social media. They're out there on, LinkedIn and places of that nature. And they're even out there in their job postings talking about themselves. And I said, there's got to be something to that. There's got to be a way that we can use that information to figure out what they care most about, to figure out their psychographics. And so that's really the thread that I kept tugging on, and was really pleasantly surprised with how effective that became in identifying the wants and needs of an actual business. And I took it actually one step further than that. Not only did I arrive at some insight as to their wants and needs, but what I found was that you could also use artificial intelligence, ancestry.com. We share common genetic markers with each other where you can reverse out and understand your family tree. Ironically or coincidentally, businesses are not much different. You can use their psychographic profiles to figure out businesses that have a very common set of needs and interests. And so what I found was that I could go back to this same idea of starting with my best customers and now just try to find more like them. And it's just a huge, my mind was blown, right? When I started doing this, because I was like, wow, I had never thought to prioritize prospects based on this data that really hadn't existed before. So that's what I've spent about a year and a half of my life trying to chase down.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So what you're saying is those same factors, the same process behind serving up suggestions on Amazon and Netflix and Spotify could be applied to the business context of a B2B context. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. And
okay,
it's helpful perhaps to use an example. I was talking, in fact, earlier this week, I was talking with a company, and they're in the call center software business. And that's a wonderfully horizontal business, not too different than many of the businesses I've been at. They can sell into any number of verticals, any number of company sizes. And it's something where if you were to use traditional firmographics, it proves to be quite challenging because you can only get so far by picking an industry and picking a company size, right? That doesn't tell you much about how well they might need a call center. So call center software, I should say. So in kind of playing this out, one of their best customers was in the payday loan space, title loans, payday loans. I don't really know much about this space. I love it. But the test was to say, hey, can we take a customer like this and based on their psychographics, can we find more like them? And what's interesting is if you go back to firmographics for a second, look at like SIC codes or NAICS codes, they would say, well, are they in retail because they have, payday loan stores, or are they in services because they're dealing with, financial implications? Are they a bank? Are they a consumer service? And that's where you begin to run into these challenges that psychographics can help us solve. And I'm not saying that psychographics are a replacement for firmographics. They're an extension in your toolkit that will allow you to, again, focus your time on where it matters most. And so what we were able to do was very quickly say, hey, I want to take this one customer and I'll let them remain nameless. And I want to try to find more like them based on their psychographic profiles and their wants and interests. And those wants and interests were very focused on payday loans. We're very focused on title loans. We're very focused on check to cash. And by looking through billions of public data sources, it's remarkable how acutely you can boil companies down to just a few of those incredibly relevant psychographics. And that's essentially what we did. And it's proven to be tremendously valuable in qualifying prospects based on psychographic fit.
Okay. So say you were able to plug it in back at Domo when you took over and you're like, okay, we got to get some prioritization. What would be like a day in the life of the SDR using Growflare to try to help them to prioritize?
Sure. Well, if I had this tool, I might not be talking to you right now.
Right. You had to end up building it yourself.
Good chance I would still be there. But yeah, I mean, really day in the life, it's a great question because, when in a perfect world, what this would help SDRs do is just have meaningful conversations with folks that want to buy or are interested in buying what they're selling. And what it means is that, when you're staring down either, whatever technology you may be using for lead routing and lead handling and lead prioritization, you'd essentially not only have more confidence in what you're selling, because what you can do is say, hey, this prospect has come in, and not only do I know what their pain points are, so I know where to focus, but I also know my best reference customer. Right? So now I know exactly what I can tailor my conversation around because it's something that I already know. It's someone that in an ideal case is somebody that I can get on the phone because they're in such a similar industry. And, of course, some cases they may be competitive and you may not want to do that. But look, if you're able to get on the phone with a prospect and you could say, hey, look, I know these guys are a competitor. I just wanted you to know that we've worked together with them and we've had great success and would love to work with you to do the same. You get instant credibility from that approach, and you're not betraying anything confidential. And it's just a better overall way, I think, to help people through that consideration process and to ultimately qualify them.
Got it. That makes such a difference because you know that if a company's working in your space, potentially with your competitors, that they understand your world. It seems like you always get those emails saying, oh, we have helped Salesforce, Google, and Microsoft to achieve X. And you're just like, dude, I've got like 4 people that work at this company. That's so irrelevant. But if it's companies that you recognize, right, and they're in your space, then you're like, whoa, wait a minute. I need to figure out what they're doing, right?
You're exactly right. And look, we all get them, right? We all get them. And in particular now that, so many of us are working from home. I mean, I'm sure your LinkedIn looks like my LinkedIn. and it's just getting assaulted every day. And, it's a real challenge, perhaps now more than ever, to rise above all that noise and to demonstrate to your prospects that you've done your homework and that you really are trying to introduce them to something that they can find value in. And, this is my experience has been thus far that this is a great new mechanism you can do to achieve that. Because again, not only do you have that relevance, but because, and we haven't gotten into this level of detail yet, but the psychographics are like your DNA, right? So about like, if you look at the psychographics for a company, they are extremely unique. And you can take that and incorporate it into your outreach, into your dialogue, which just helps create this relationship of trust and relevance and credibility that, that I think everybody wants. And I think everybody is trying to, I think that they ideally want to deliver that to their prospects. I think the challenge is that, again, if you're dealing with 100 inbound leads a week, how are you going to do that? How are you going to go out to all of these public sources and distill all this information and hope that you just get right and say something relevant? And that's why I love technology, to be perfectly honest, because it's human augmentation. You can let AI do this for you. You can let machine learning do this for you. And then you can pick and choose what you want to introduce into your dialogue to achieve the most relevance and the most credibility with the specific prospect that you're talking to.
Yeah, I think it's, kind of depends on the stage of the company, but at first it's like any lead that comes in is a good lead, and your database is just, you throw in a bunch of stuff and you hope for the best, and you kind of have a vague idea of what your ICP is. But especially as you get to a more mature stage, then it's like what you saw at Domo. It becomes like huge time commitment to be able to have to sort through the wrong leads and the wrong people, and you just end up not being as successful. So is there a certain size of company that you've seen is there like threshold that you would need to be able to plug in something like this?
That's a great question, because one of the pain points that I had early on when I first started looking at some of the available technologies at the time was that they oftentimes required a lengthy implementation. And what I mean by that is, oftentimes they were AI based, but to train the AI, you needed a ton of data. And to get a ton of data, you usually had to have a lot of runway, 100 customers, a few thousand leads. And, I come out of the machine learning space, so I can tell you that you get into very dangerous territory if you don't have that, because you can get a lot of false positives. So when I first started trying to solve this problem, I had a couple of key tenets, and those were that I wanted no implementation, I wanted it to be super fast, and I wanted it to be directly accessible to an SDR, right? I didn't want it to be a black box that just spit out some kind of archaic score, and you say, okay, well, it's telling me that it's an A1, so I should get on the phone, or it's a D4, so I shouldn't. But I don't know why, and I don't even know what that means, right? So I really worked, and maybe that's why it took me 3 times long to build this thing. But the reality is that a lot of it just depends on the approach, and when you take an approach where you're doing similarity matching based on psychographics, you can get started right away. You can have one customer. You can have no customers. You can actually just have one lead that says, and just think about it like your own experience, right? Like, pick a song you like. If you're on Spotify, you pick a song you like. All you need is one song, and Spotify will recommend a bunch more to you. It's the same thing on Netflix. It's the same thing on Amazon. It's the same thing with what I built with Growflare. You don't need a rich history of 6 to 12 months. You don't need to be a big, mature company. And in fact, as much as I've enjoyed my time at big companies, I really do enjoy that kind of hyper growth, opportunity to work with smaller ones where you're molding the clay, because so much of this is fluid and you get to learn so much every day that you navigate it. So To answer your question, no, you kind of get started at any point in the journey, whether you're, one or two person startup or Fortune 500 company.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. That's a good analogy because even if you're just starting out and you're trying to figure out your ICP and the ideal people to call, you've got some kind of thesis at least. You might have a couple of customers that you can put, and then it'll start to actually help you to, lead you to more. It's almost like the digital breadcrumbs type of thing.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. And what I'll also add to that is that it's not necessarily restricted to just your customers. And sort of outbound prospects, you can also apply this to your CRM. And this was another one of those red herrings that I ended up inheriting. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate to this, where the CRMs can be kind of like your grandma's attic. Where it's just, it's just everything magically makes its way up there. And, before you know it, it's just chock full of things that you never really know how they got there. And you're not really sure if you need, and you don't know if, you got to go on Antique Roadshow to figure out if they're worth anything. It's kind of the same thing with the CRM, where there are tremendous. I mean, I've worked at companies where I've owned CRMs that are millions of contacts. I've been in those rooms where we've talked about outbound campaigns and, we need to goose revenue. So let's just set up a nurture campaign and let's just peel off these people, and then let's peel off people that went to stage 2 but never did this or did that. And, response rates of those campaigns are usually just catastrophically terrible.
Yeah.
And
tiny.
Right. Yeah, they're tiny. And it's just carpet bombing, and you're trying. And what you end up doing too is you end up damaging your brand, because you just keep just browbeating these folks with, and then again, I don't mean this in a disparaging way at all. I'm just simply reflecting on my experience where, we'd see a huge number of unsubscribes, and, people were dejected and they're annoyed, and, you just weren't really being thoughtful about how to connect with their pain. And one of the cool things that I've found in exploring this really new emerging field of psychographics is that you can go back into your CRM and you can run the same routine. So instead of turning the lens outwards, which is much more of an acquisition strategy, you can turn the lens inwards, and you can say, hey, these are our 100 best customers, or these are our 5 best customers. Now, of everyone in our CRM, who is most similar to them? And it's a 90-degree pivot from what you and I have been talking about so far. And it's just tremendously valuable because you've already paid for that data, right? I mean, the average B2B lead is about $150 to $200, which is insanely expensive. And here, with this new technological approach, for essentially pennies on the dollar, you can go back in and very quickly essentially find the gold in your CRM and resuscitate opportunities in a very personalized and need-driven way that you really just couldn't do before. So it's tremendously exciting.
Got it. So in that case, you're kind of reversing it. So you're not in there proactively looking for, the right leads. You can actually upload, or connect it to your CRM, and then it could potentially prioritize it for you.
That's exactly right. So, again, rather than boiling the ocean in your CRM and just kind of burning a lot of that equity, why not just ask the question, who in my CRM that I have not, essentially successfully converted into a customer represents the most potential based on my existing customers? And that's really the simplicity of the question, right? It's just, it's something where I think that if you're looking for, and again, in the time that we're in, I think this is extremely appropriate. If you're looking for one of the most cost-effective ways to bring more business to your company, I personally think that this is, I'm obviously I'm a little bit biased, but
yeah, use what you got already, and
that's right. I mean,
that's
prioritized. The mentality.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So what's next then? So is it launched? Are you going to do a big campaign? Like, how do you get this out there to people?
Yeah, great question. That's sort of what brought us together, of course, not too long ago. Certainly, I sort of fell into the long-time listener, first-time caller. I've been a big fan of yours and the work that you've done. And so really for us, this has been a passion project for the last 18 months. And just in the last couple of weeks, we finally put it out there for everybody to use. And, we're really trying to solve a problem altruistically. I mean, yes, we have a business that we want to build, but I felt this pain. I felt this pain at many companies. I've seen a lot of good people struggle in ways that I never really thought that they should. And so we really want to help people solve this pain and introduce them to something new that's approachable and consumable. So our approach is one where you can use this for free. You can get started for free. You can go to the website and explore the product. There's no gotchas. I'm not going to spew. I don't collect your data. I'm not going to hit you with ads. I'm not going to sell it to anyone. So nice. We're really trying to do good here.
Okay, sweet. So just go over to Growflare and check it out.
Yeah, and honestly, we'd love the feedback. Look, we learn by failing, and if you find something, you happen to find something that doesn't work for you or you'd like to see, we'd love to hear it. If you're interested in learning more about just this world of psychographics more broadly, we've taken a pretty novel approach to this that we haven't seen anybody pursue. We're interested in the conversation. Right? If there's other ways to apply this, we believe in the greater good. So don't be shy.
I love it, man. I want to check it out. So you might have your first free trial on your hands. So I appreciate it, man.
Love it. Yeah, I love it.
Well, Matt, thank you so much. That was an interesting journey. And, there's such a huge desire for that ability to, just stop wasting so much time and to really prioritize the leads, especially if you've already got them in this environment. So appreciate you walking us through that and coming on the show. If folks want to, get in there and start messing with it, how do they find you and how do they light up that free system?
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity, David, and super simple. Just go to growflare.com. There's a free sign up right there. It's free to use forever. You basically, upgrade as you grow. And again, welcome the feedback.
All right. Well, Matt Belkin, thanks for coming on the Sales Development Podcast. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks so much, David.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Development Podcast, the only audio forum 100% focused and dedicated to sales development, with your host, David Delaney. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on YouTube and take a moment to leave us a review on iTunes. Your support makes our show possible. If you are struggling with your sales development program, contact us at tenbound.com for a no-obligation exploratory call. Again, that's tenbound.com.